Open RAN networks, and improve the coordination of federal spectrum efforts, and more. I want to thank our colleagues on the subcommittee for their leadership on these initiatives. We will also consider several additional pieces of legislation today. The Spectrum Relocation Enhancement Act, introduced by the ranking member of the subcommittee, would make changes to what costs are eligible for reimbursement from Spectrum Relocation Fund, or SRF, how federal agencies receive these payments, and increase NTIA's oversight over SRF activities. In addition to spectrum policy, we would consider the Artificial Intelligence Accountability Act, introduced by the gentleman from California's 9th District, which would direct NTIA to conduct a study on accountability measures for AI systems used by communication networks. Finally, we will consider the Diaspora Link Act, introduced by the delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands. This legislation would direct NTIA to submit a report to Congress assessing the feasibility of developing a transatlantic submarine fiber optic cable connecting the contiguous United States, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Ghana, and Nigeria. I would like to thank the members of the subcommittee for their work on these measures, and I'm pleased that we were able to move forward on this legislation in a bipartisan manner. I look forward to, again, working with the stakeholders and our colleagues on both sides as we move this to full committee markup. I now recognize the gentlelady from California, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for an opening statement in 5 minutes, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Oversight of the NTIA is one of the most crucial functions of this subcommittee. Since it was last reauthorized more than 30 years ago, the pace of technological renovation has accelerated exponentially. As our lives become increasingly digital, the importance of this agency has only grown. From spectrum governance to the digital economy, NTIA must be empowered to keep America the vanguard of global tech leadership. With the bipartisan NTIA Reauthorization Act, we're providing new tools and authority to ensure the agency can keep up with the pace of innovation. By elevating the NTIA administrator from assistant to undersecretary, we're reinforcing the statutory role of NTIA to speak on behalf of the federal government on important tech issues. And we're modernizing the agency's mission to reflect the challenges of today and opportunities of tomorrow. It also includes my Spectrum Coexistence Act, which require NTIA to conduct a review of federal receiver technology to support more intensive use of limited spectrum. The FCC released a set of receiver principles for commercial equipment, and it's important we do the same for federal tech. We can't afford to have outdated equipment on the commercial or government side, preventing opportunities for more efficient uses of spectrum. This bill also includes a SMART Act Congressman Guthrie and I introduced to develop an incumbent informing capability. This would allow federal users to share spectrum with commercial users by telling them when and where they're operating in real time. I'm also glad to see my Spectrum Relocation Enhancement Act on the agenda today. The Spectrum Relocation Fund compensates federal agencies for moving off spectrum to make it available for commercial use. While the fund has been successful, it needs to be modernized. Outdated limitations in the fund are holding it back. This bill addresses that. By allowing agencies to replace their technology with an enhanced capability, they will be more equipped for their missions, be better spectrum neighbors, and have more incentive to participate with the fund. Taken together, this bill and the provisions in the NTIA Reauthorization Act will make the federal government a more positive force in maintaining a healthy spectrum pipeline. But we're also taking steps to ensure NTIA has the tools it needs to continue important work, expanding broadband access and increasing cybersecurity. As BEAD investments start to flow to the states, this bill will ensure NTIA is coordinated with the entire federal government on closing the digital divide. We're also reinforcing NTIA's role in promoting cybersecurity and communications technology. As cyber attacks targeting our communications network grow more frequent and severe, we cannot afford to maintain the status quo. The coordination and collaboration between government, researchers, and industry will better prepare us for the cyber threats on the horizon. I want to thank Chairman Latta for the partnership on this bill, the bipartisan agenda before us today. I'm looking forward to advancing these bills to the full committee and ultimately the floor. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington, the chair of the full Committee of Energy and Commerce, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Today, we are marking up legislation to reauthorize the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA. And I want to thank the subcommittee chairman, Bob Latta, for his leadership on this legislation. One of my top priorities as chair of Energy and Commerce is to reauthorize agencies within our jurisdiction. This is an important part of our congressional oversight and ensures that we're carrying out our responsibility as the representatives of the people to hold agencies accountable, give them statutory direction, provide the tools that agencies need to carry out and stay true to their mission. In NTIA's case, Congress has not reauthorized the administration since 1992. A lot has changed in the last 31 years, both in the technology sector and at NTIA. Today's NTIA plays a critical role in everything from broadband deployment and federal spectrum management to internet governance and cybersecurity, issues not common or even in existence when the agency was last reauthorized. NTIA's budget reflects this change. In 1992, Congress authorized an appropriation of $17.9 million. This year, Congress appropriated NTIA with $62 million. Now is the time for us to reauthorize NTIA. NTIA plays a significant role in closing the digital divide, overseeing a number of programs related to broadband access. This reauthorization would help ensure that NTIA has the right structure to manage these programs and coordinate with other agencies that maintain broadband programs. Reauthorization also presents an opportunity to strengthen NTIA's role as federal spectrum manager. Spectrum disputes between agencies have become more and more common in recent years, highlighting the need to strengthen and clearly define NTIA's role. The bill before us does this by clarifying that NTIA is responsible for coordinating the views of the executive branch and presenting that to the FCC, and by building more safeguards into the federal coordination procedures so that other agencies' needs are appropriately accounted for. NTIA also leads in addressing some of our top telecommunications challenges, including in cybersecurity and public safety. This legislation establishes new offices related to both and provides clarity and transparency for the team telecom process for national security reviews of foreign participation in the telecommunications sector. Finally, our legislation elevates the responsibility of NTIA within the executive branch by promoting the NTIA administrator from an Assistant Secretary of Commerce to an Undersecretary of Commerce. NTIA plays a much larger role today within the federal government as coordinator of the federal broadband programs, federal spectrum manager, and representative of the United States in international telecommunications forums. These are significant government-wide responsibilities, and this elevation reflects that. Again, I want to thank the members of the subcommittee for their work on these measures. I look forward to discussing them and advancing them today to the full committee. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Latta. Today, we're marking up several bipartisan bills that collectively will reauthorize the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, and these bills will ensure that this important agency has the authorities it needs to continue to oversee technological advancements in such areas as spectrum management and artificial intelligence. The subcommittee's action on these bills will also allow NTIA to continue making strides in helping connect all Americans to high-speed, reliable, and affordable broadband. The NTIA is the primary federal agency implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law's historic $65 billion broadband investments that are finally giving us the opportunity to bridge the digital divide. And these investments are going to help grow the economy and the middle class and communities throughout the nation that have simply been left behind far too long. First, I'm pleased that we're considering H.R. 4510, the NTIA Reauthorization Act, bipartisan legislation introduced by Chairman Latta and Ranking Member Matsui. This legislation reauthorizes NTIA and elevates its leadership in the Department of Commerce by making the administration or the administrator position an undersecretary. Taking these important steps will better reflect NTIA's importance in being the agency that serves as the President's primary advisor on telecommunications and technology policy. This bill includes the text of several bipartisan bills the subcommittee has worked on, in some cases going back to last Congress. It includes the plan for Broadband Act, co-led by Representatives Custer and Wahlberg, which directs the NTIA to develop a national strategy to close the digital divide. As part of this strategy, the agency must develop a plan to monitor the consistency, affordability, and quality of broadband service supported by federal broadband programs. It also includes Representative Allred's Open RAN Outreach Act and two bills co-led by Representative Eshoo to address cybersecurity issues. With the enormous responsibilities we give to NTIA through this legislation, it's critical that we not only reauthorize the agency, but also ensure that NTIA is fully funded for this upcoming fiscal year. The bipartisan infrastructure law's investment will help bring broadband infrastructure to all corners of the nation. But in order to accomplish this monumental task, NTIA must be quickly reauthorized and fully funded. We'll also consider H.R. 3430, the Spectrum Relocation Enhancement Act, a bipartisan bill that Ranking Member Matsui introduced earlier this year. That bill will enhance NTIA's federal spectrum relocation efforts by providing additional flexibility on the types of systems that federal entities can consider when evaluating the feasibility of relocating or sharing their assigned spectrum resources. And this flexibility will help ensure that these resources are being utilized in an efficient and effective manner. And then we have H.R. 3369, the Artificial Intelligence Accountability Act, introduced by Representatives Harder and Kelly. This bill directs NTIA to assess the degree to which AI systems are accountable to consumers and what measures are needed to reduce the risks surrounding them. While AI systems offer enormous potential, it's imperative that we have the tools to ensure they are designed with consumers in mind and to hold them accountable when they're not. And finally, we have H.R. 3385, the Diaspora Link Act, introduced by Representative Plaskett, and this bill will require NTIA to assess the value of developing a transatlantic submarine fiber cable connecting the United States, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Ghana, and Nigeria to increase the security of our network. So let me say, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the work of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to reach bipartisan agreement on these important bills so that we can consider them for markup today. There's still more work to do before we consider these proposals at a full committee markup, and I look forward to working with Chairs Rogers and Latta and Ranking Member Matsui so we can be sure to get the policies right and workable for the agency before we advance them to the full committee. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The chair reminds members that pursuant to the committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. Are there any further opening statements?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized to strike the last word for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bipartisan package we're considering today would reauthorize the NTIA and modernize its mission, improving spectrum management, eliminating unnecessary bureaucratic reporting, and codifying essential offices within the agency. It also includes my H.R. 4505, the proper leadership to align networks for Broadband Act or Plan for Broadband Act, which requires the NTIA, in consultation with all relevant agencies, to develop and implement a national strategy to close the digital divide. The legislation is based off recommendations from a Government Accountability Office report from last May. The report found that there are more than 130 federal broadband programs administered by 15 different agencies. These programs include hundreds of billions of dollars that can be used to increase connection across the country. But without clear goals, objectives, and performance measures, these programs are fragmented and tend to overlap. Unless we implement proper coordination, there are serious concerns about duplication and overbuilding. This duplication has already occurred. In one example, multiple awards from the FCC's high-cost program and the USDA's Rural Utility Service program had overlapping service areas. There are still millions of people across the country, especially those in rural areas like my district, who do not have access to a reliable internet connection. We can't be wasting time, money, and resources deploying to areas that have already been covered. The plan would synchronize interagency coordination among federal broadband programs, identifying ways to lower costs and ease administrative burdens for states and localities to participate in these programs and make recommendations to better distribute and administer federal funds. This is key to closing the digital divide. I want to thank my Rural Broadband Caucus co-chair, Congresswoman Custer, as well as Senators Wicker, Thune, Lujan, and Welch for joining me in introducing this legislation. Without coordination, no amount of money will truly get rural America connected. We need a national broadband strategy. I encourage my colleagues to support the legislation. And before I yield back, if someone wanted to use my remaining time, I'd be glad to yield.
I just wanted to thank you for introducing the bill. I think coordination and planning is critical to reach the 24 million Americans who still do not have internet access. And I thank you, and I yield back.
I thank my colleague, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 3 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We worked together with President Biden and with the Congress last term with a generational goal, which is to ensure that every American has access to high-speed internet, urban, suburban, rural areas across Central Florida and our nation. We had a great start with the American Rescue Plan, which saw about 14 million plus go to rural areas of South Osceola County in Florida's 9th Congressional District. But then we made the big down payment, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which provided $65 billion to help with broadband investment, including $42 billion for the BEAD program. We saw Florida finally get their award, $1.17 billion just 2 weeks ago to help across the Sunshine State. While we see these major investments, these generational investments, there are challenges ahead. How best to close the digital divide, the divide between the haves and the have-nots of high-speed internet. How to make our telecommunication system more resilient against cybersecurity attacks, and also to improve public safety for our first responders responding to hurricanes and other natural disasters. I'm proud to support the NTIA Reauthorization Act today, which is going to help us address some of these major challenges as we forge ahead on this audacious goal to ensure every American has access to high-speed internet. And I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Are there any further opening statements? The gentlelady from California's 16th District is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, colleagues. I move to strike the last word. The NTIA is the primary agency dedicated to managing spectrum for federal use, expanding broadband access, and developing federal policy on the internet economy. The NTIA, as has been mentioned by colleagues, was last reauthorized in 1992 when the internet was in its infancy. The internet and wireless technology have changed so significantly in the last 30 years, and it's so important that we modernize the agency's mission and provide the resources it needs to carry out that mission. Congress has tasked the NTIA with distributing $65 billion, with a B, $billion in funding from the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act to help connect Americans to reliable, affordable broadband. The NTIA announced its allocations to each state at the end of last month, including $1.8 billion for my home state of California. These funds are going to help bridge the digital divide and better connect our nation, and the agency has to be fully funded to ensure it can effectively implement this program. My Silicon Valley district, you all would assume, is fully connected throughout the district. That's not the case. I have rural areas that are still left wanting, and the implementation of this program is really, it's exciting because this is a generational investment. Two of my bills are included in this reauthorization to address cybersecurity threats. The American Cybersecurity Literacy Act, which I co-led with Representative Obernolte, requires the NTIA to conduct a public education campaign to improve American cyber literacy. Through this campaign, the NTIA will provide information about common cybersecurity risks and best practices to mitigate those risks. The reauthorization also includes the Understanding Cybersecurity of Mobile Networks Act, which I introduced with Representative Kamek. This important bill requires the NTIA to study the cybersecurity vulnerabilities of mobile networks and report those findings to Congress. Every day, Americans make calls, send texts, access data on 2G, 3G, and 4G networks, but we lack a full understanding of their vulnerabilities, what issues have been resolved, and where mobile cybersecurity policymaking should be focused. Americans need to trust the networks they use and be confident that Congress is working to ensure those networks are safe, and this bill will help us accomplish that. Finally, the NTIA jointly administers the National 911 program with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Most 911 call centers throughout the country still use legacy technology developed over 50 years ago. And Representative Hudson and I introduced the next generation 911 Act to help states and local governments modernize these call centers. While this bill was considered in our NTIA hearing, it's not part of today's reauthorization because it was already included in the Spectrum Auction Reauthorization Act that we marked up in May. So I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful to every member that participated on both sides of the aisle to bring this forward, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Are there any other members wishing to offer an opening statement? Seeing none, I will conclude opening statements. The chair now calls up H.R. 4510 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 4510, a bill to reauthorize the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to update the mission and functions
Without
of
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? The vice chairman, the gentleman from Georgia, seeks recognition.
Move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized to strike the last word for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of H.R. 4510, the NTIA Reauthorization Act of 2023, which includes my bill, the ITS Codification Act, which passed unanimously on the House floor this past April. The Institute for Telecommunications Sciences, or ITS, is essential to informing important spectrum policy decisions and contributing innovative advancements that are crucial to our global competitiveness. NTIA relies on complex technical radio frequency testing and analysis conducted by ITS, and therefore we must strengthen its statutory authority to ensure it continues to do so. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan legislation to modernize NTIA, which has not been reauthorized in 30 years. And at this time, I will yield to Representative Joyce.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And I also thank you, Chairman Latta, for holding this markup as we work together to pass this critical legislation. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration plays an essential role in the modernization of Americans' broadband infrastructure and promoting digital inclusion and accessibility, particularly in rural areas like the one that I represent in Pennsylvania. With so many Americans relying on high-speed internet and broadband access for both work and to learn, it is more important than ever that we pass a strong NTIA reauthorization package, which is precisely what Chairman Latta's bill does. Included in H.R. 4510 is my bill, H.R. 1354, the Information and Communication Technology Strategy Act. This bipartisan bill guarantees that NTIA develops a strategy to strengthen the telecommunications market and supply chain. With increasing threats from global manufacturers, we must ensure that American telecommunications manufacturing base remains competitive with other governments and other countries. My bill allows the NTIA to identify ways for the federal government to better protect and strengthen our supply chain, a much-needed capacity in an ever-changing world. We need to ensure that America remains the global leader in telecommunications and technology, and this bill today will make sure that this is indeed the case. I encourage all members to vote yes on H.R. 4510, the NTIA Reauthorization Act. And I yield my remaining time to Representative Balderson.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Mr. Chairman, thank you for hosting this important markup and bringing this bill before the subcommittee today. Since 1993, technology and the use of the spectrum have evolved rapidly. During this time, for example, cell phones evolved from simple devices that made voice calls to sleek smartphones that put the internet in the palm of our hands. Despite these rapid advancements in technology, it's been 30 years since Congress reauthorized the NTIA, which is the steward of the federal spectrum and the chief advisor to the president on these issues. This reauthorization is long overdue, and I commend you, Mr. Chairman, for introducing this bill and moving it forward. In an effort to make sure the NTIA keeps up with the times, I introduced the Spectrum Coordination Act. This bill ensures the NTIA and the FCC are on the same page when it comes to spectrum actions and requires them to update their MOU on spectrum coordination every 4 years. This language will ensure the agencies work together and stay up to date with the rapidly evolving use of our nation's valuable spectrum. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing the importance of sound coordination between the NTIA and the FCC by including my Spectrum Coordination Act in this reauthorization. I encourage all of my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back my remaining time to Mr. Curtis. Okay, I yield back to Mr. Chairman.
Does the Vice Chair wish to yield to someone else?
Mr. Chairman, I yield to Representative Kamick.
Thank you to my friend from the great state of Georgia, and thank you to Chairman Latta for your leadership on this bill, H.R. 4510, the NTIA Reauthorization Act. I support this bill and encourage all of my colleagues to support it as well. As we have said here multiple times today, this program has not been reauthorized in over 30 years, since 1992, but the agency's mission and its functions have only grown in importance. NTIA serves as the principal advisor for the President on telecommunications and information policy issues. The agency itself plays a vital role in federal spectrum management, public safety communications, and more. Now, a few weeks ago, NTIA administered the largest broadband grant program ever by distributing $42.5 billion in funding to states through the BEAD program. Furthermore, earlier this spring, NTIA began seeking input through a request for comment on AI. H.R. 4510 will make the important changes necessary to update the mission and functions of the agency to ensure it is equipped to meet the challenges of today by updating the existing 30-year authorization with this bill. In addition, I am particularly proud that 2 of my bills are included in this reauthorization, the Public Safety Communications Act and the Understanding Cybersecurity Mobile Networks Act, which I co-led with Representative Eshoo. Again, I want to thank Chairman Latta for his leadership on this bill, and I encourage all of my colleagues to support it. I yield back.
Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. Are there any others? The gentlelady, the ranking member of the subcommittee, is recognized. 5 minutes. Right to the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. Let me start by thanking you, Mr. Chairman, for your commitment to moving this package as a bipartisan bill. The role of NTIA in the federal government has never been more critical. Reporting a bipartisan product from this subcommittee shows we're serious about reasserting and expanding the agency's responsibilities. By elevating the role of the administrator, we're helping NTIA better satisfy its mission, serving as the agency principally responsible by law for advising the President on telecommunications and information policy. As the pace of innovation quickens, the government needs to speak with one voice when addressing emerging tech challenges. From spectrum to cybersecurity to the digital economy, It's imperative that NTIA have the expertise and authority to advance our interests. As I said in my opening, this bill includes important provisions that will make the agency more nimble and better equipped to represent America's interests on the global stage. The pillars in this bill outline a roadmap for U.S. leadership in policy areas that would determine global leadership in the coming decades. That includes spectrum management, cybersecurity, and international coordination. By giving existing NTIA offices statutory authority and more clearly defining their objectives, this bill provides the stability and strategy America needs to stay ahead of its peers. For more than 30 years, the NTIA has operated without a congressional reauthorization. I'm hopeful this bill will end that streak. It's bipartisan, has sound policy, and is well overdue. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm excited to continue working with you to get this bill to the floor as soon as we can. With that, is there anyone else on my side who wants time yielded? Doesn't look like it. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from California seeks to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move to strike the last word.
You're recognized for 5 minutes. Strike the last word.
Mr. Chairman, I am proud to rise in support of the NTIA reauthorization bill that we're considering today, and I would like to thank you very much for including my bill, the American Cybersecurity Literacy Act, in this bill package. This is a bipartisan bill that I co-led with Congresswoman Eshoo that would seek to better educate the American public on the dangers of cybersecurity and what they need to do to enhance their own cybersecurity. I don't think it's news to anyone that cybersecurity is a growing threat to the American public, and yet I think our public is woefully undereducated on this issue. And if you want proof of that, look no further than the fact that currently the most popular password used by American computer users is in itself the word password, followed in second place by the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 together. And that is particularly troubling when you consider that recent cybersecurity problems and hacks by foreign actors have revolved around the compromise of personal passwords. In fact, in 2021, the Colonial Pipeline was taken down by the hack of a personal password. That resulted in the disruption of oil supplies to the entire eastern half of the United States. That's an indication of the dangers that can occur when the public doesn't take the issue of cybersecurity seriously. So this bill would direct the NTIA to conduct a public outreach campaign on how Americans can better protect themselves from cybersecurity threats. I think it's a worthwhile bill, and I thank you for including it in this bill package. I encourage the bill package's adoption. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Are there other members wishing to be recognized? Seeing none, are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Hearing none, the question now occurs on forwarding H.R. 4510 to the full committee. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. The chair calls up 3430 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 3430, a bill to amend the National Telecommunications and Information Administration Organization Act to enhance federal spectrum relocation and for
Without
other
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment.
The gentleman has, is it a bipartisan amendment to the bill?
Yes, it is.
The clerk, what's your amendment?
029.
The clerk will report.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3430 offered by Mr. Weber. Strike all after the enacting clause and insert the following. Section 1,
Without
short
objection,
title.
the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The gentleman is now recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank Ranking Member Matsui for working with the majority on this amendment. The Spectrum Relocation Fund is an important tool to ensure that we can make more spectrum available for commercial use while also incentivizing federal agencies to use that spectrum more efficiently. This amendment would make improvements to the bill that would help speed the process for federal agencies to use that spectrum, their spectrum, more efficiently, and make more federal spectrum actually commercially available. I welcome the opportunity to work with Ranking Member Matsui and with stakeholders as we move to the full committee markup, and I urge my colleagues to support. And Mr. Chairman, unless somebody wants me to yield back time, I will yield it to you.
I think the,
Mayor,
what's wrong,
let's strike the last word.
okay, the gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady, the ranking member from the subcommittee, for 5 minutes. Strike the last word on the
Thank you,
amendment.
Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. First, I want to thank Congresswoman Weber for the collaboration on this bill. The Spectrum Relocation Fund is one of the most important tools we have to incentivize federal agencies to clear spectrum for commercial use. The SRF reimburses agencies for the costs that come with repurposing spectrum. However, outdated language restricts agencies to purchasing replacement equipment with only a comparable capability. That means agencies are forced to maintain the same standard of equipment even if more efficient technology is available. This restriction undermines the incentive for agencies and limits the overall effectiveness of the fund. That's why our bill follows the recommendations of industry, academia, and public interest by providing needed flexibility for agencies to enhance the capability of their equipment through the SRF. This has two benefits. It creates a more meaningful incentive for agencies to participate in SRF, and it ensures they have the state-of-the-art equipment they need for their vital missions. To maintain the solvency of the SRF, we've included new guardrails on this flexibility. This will allow the SRF to stay relevant while ensuring it remains on solid financial footing. In the long run, this bill will better serve federal agencies while making more spectrum available for commercial use. I'm glad to see it advancing today and am committed to continuing to work on it as we head to a full committee markup soon. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. Is there any other discussion on the amendment? Hearing none. All those in favor by signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Are there any other amendments to the bill? Any other member wishing to be recognized? If not, question now occurs forwarding H.R. 3430 as amended to the full committee. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is agreed to. Chair calls up H.R. 3385 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 3385, a bill to direct the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information to submit to Congress a report containing an assessment of the value,
Without
cost-
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? For what purposes, gentlemen from Idaho wish to be recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk, and I move to strike the last word.
What's your amendment title, please?
Amendment title is the Diaspora Link Act, AINS to, AINS H335, number 1.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3385, offered by Mr. Fulcher. Strike all after the enacting clause and insert the following. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited
Without
as...
objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in support of the Ains.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment to the Diaspora Act, Link Act, H.R. 3385, would require NTIA to study the value, cost, and feasibility of running a transatlantic undersea fiber optic cable from the U.S. Virgin Islands in the Caribbean to the continent of Africa. I want to thank my colleague Stacy Plaskett for working with me on this issue. And just by word of background, undersea cables carry more than 95% of international data. and that delivers military and civilian connections to meet a wide variety of needs. And while the bulk of these connect the U.S. and Europe, the military, specifically Africa Command, and Special Forces Command, may benefit or could be compromised. That's why the study, as a result of this cable. Besides counterterrorism and other security concerns, the U.S. may benefit from trade and investment in countering China in the region. This amendment would ensure the private sector has information from the NTIA to evaluate whether this is a good investment on this project. Before we embark on large projects of this scale, a study should be warranted. And I want to again thank the Delegate Plaskett from Virgin Islands for working with me on this issue. Mr. Chairman, I urge passage of this amendment. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. Is there any other further discussion on the Ains? Hearing that there's no further discussion on the Ains, all those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the Ains is agreed to. The question now occurs on forwarding H.R. 3385 as amended to the full committee. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is agreed to. Chair calls up 3369 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 3369, a bill to direct the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information to conduct a study and hold public meetings with respect to artificial intelligence systems and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. Does any member seek to be recognized on the bill? What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
Would the gentleman tell the clerk what the amendment number is, please?
It's amendment number 1.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3369, offered by Mr. Obernolte of California. Strike all.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentleman is recognized to strike the last word for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in proud support of this bill that would direct the Assistant Secretary of Commerce to conduct a study with academia and representatives of industry on how to enhance the accountability of AI systems as they relate to communications networks. Enhancing the accountability of these systems is a meaningful step in reducing the risks that they pose to consumers and to society at large, and I think it's a very worthwhile step that is worthy of everyone's support. This amendment in the nature of a substitute incorporates feedback from industry and from stakeholders, and I think it improves the bill. I would respectfully urge its adoption. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. Is there any further discussion on the gentleman's Ains? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the Ains will signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Ains is agreed to. Is there any further discussion? For purposes, gentlemen from California wish to be recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk designated Obernolte 033.
Oh, the clerk will report the amendment, please.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3369, offered by Mr. Obernolte of California. Page 3, strike lines 9.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to discuss his amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This amendment adds a definition of the word trustworthy to the bill. The bill defines an accountability system as a mechanism for enhancing the trustworthiness of AI, but the bill doesn't define what trustworthy means. I think it's important that we be very specific when we talk about what our objectives are, and the trustworthiness of AI is something that has been a subject of hot debate both in industry and in academia. I think it is reasonable that we try to define exactly what we mean when we say AI is trustworthy. The amendment that I'm offering uses language from the NIST framework to define the term trustworthy. I think it improves the bill. However, we did not get this done in time to include it in the bipartisan ANS that I just offered. Out of respect for the bipartisan process and a desire for that this bill move forward in a bipartisan fashion, I'm going to withdraw my amendment, but I would urge its inclusion when we consider this bill in full committee. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman withdraws his amendment. Is there any further discussion on the Ains? Hearing none. The question now occurs on forwarding 3369 as amended to the full committee. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. Without objection, staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the legislation approved by the subcommittee today, so ordered. I'd just like to first, again, thank our staff for the great work they've done on all these bills and getting to the point where we are today. Again, dealing with NTIA in about a 31-year hiatus from not being being out there. It's we've disposed of everything in less than 50 minutes. So I think that's great work by the committee staff and also by the committee members. So congratulations and thank you very much. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.